To viewers in North America on PBS and around the globe. My name is Nkem Ifejika and these are our top stories. America's National Rifle Association takes legal action against new gun legislation introduced in the state of Florida. Donald Trump strikes a positive tone over a potential meeting with Kim Jong-un, saying a deal is very much in the making. In Syria, an aid convoy successfully unloads its food supplies in the rebel-held enclave of Eastern Ghouta. And embracing the veil, why increasing numbers of young British Muslim women are deciding to wear a headscarf. Welcome to the program. The bitter row over America's gun laws has resurfaced, with the pro-lobby group, the National Rifle Association, a swift legal challenge to new gun control measures signed into law in Florida. The legislation imposes a 21-year-old age limit and a 3-day waiting period on all gun purchases. Now, the move follows a school shooting at Parkland in which 17 students were killed. Russell Trott reports.
Of gun control and the families of those killed in Florida's school shooting, it was a simple yet historic moment as Governor Rick Scott signs new gun control legislation into law. The bill raises the age to buy a gun from 18 to 21 and imposes a 3-day waiting period on all gun sales. It allows school personnel to be armed, subject to school district approval and specialist training. But most notably, the law doesn't include a ban on semi-automatic assault rifles, the kind that was used in the school shooting.
So after reviewing the entire bill, I had to ask myself, will it make a huge investment and dramatically improve school safety in hopes of never seeing a tragedy like this again? Will this bill provide more to the mentally ill? Will this bill give far more tools to keep guns away from people who should not have them? The answer to all three is yes.
It was one of the worst school shootings in US history. Within the space of 10 minutes, 17 teachers and students were gunned down at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Expelled former student Nicholas Cruz, who's 19, has been charged with murder and attempted murder. Protesters took their campaign for tighter gun control to Washington, meeting President Trump in the process.
I want to conclude on one final...
Governor Scott is himself a member of the pro-gun lobby, the NRA. It's now filed a federal lawsuit claiming the bill violates both the 2nd and 14th Amendments of the Constitution, the right to bear arms and to equal protection under the law. He says the bill is a compromise, balancing individual rights with the need for public safety. Russell Trott, BBC News.
Well, Chris Buckler is in Washington for us. Chris, first things first, why does the NRA feel so strongly about this? Why are they taking so strongly against it?
To this particular act, which is named after the high school, which, of course, was the scene of that dreadful shooting just a matter of a month ago. But the NRA is particularly objecting to the part of the Act which stops anyone from the age of 21 from being able to buy a gun. That raises the age from 18 to 21 in Florida. And as far as they're concerned, they say it breaches the constitutional rights of Americans. They say it is against amendments, the 2nd Amendment of the Constitution, which is the right to bear arms, and also against the 14th Amendment, which is about equal protection. They say simply that anyone who's aged over 18 should have the right to have a gun, and they say it particularly discriminates against young women who they say are particularly unfairly treated by this particular act because they say they pose a low risk of being involved in violent crime.
If you look at the optics, I guess, the way that all this appears, it would seem to me, kids 1, NRA 0.
Well, certainly what you're seeing over the last while is that you have a huge student body in that Parkland area who have been affected themselves very personally by a school shooting in which 17 people died, 17 people who were pupils alongside them or members of that school staff. and they have told a very powerful story. They have taken a campaign to the White House, and they are planning a march before the end of this month, not just in Washington, D.C., but in cities across America. And it is true that they have a very, very powerful voice, and it comes with personal experience. However, at the same time, it's also worth reflecting that the National Rifle Association also has a very powerful voice in America. It has a huge amount of support, and it also has a lot of political sway. Although President Trump last week said that he wanted tighter gun laws, he also reflected that some members of his Republican Party were, in his view, scared of the NRA. And maybe it's also worth reflecting that the day after he said he wanted tighter gun laws, he also met the National Rifle Association. That might also be an indication of their political sway.
Thank you very much. That's Chris Buckler in Washington, D.C. Well, speaking of President Trump, there are mixed messages coming from the White House about what conditions need to be met before President Trump can meet the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In a tweet in just the last hour, Mr. Trump said that a deal is very much in the making and would be a very good one for the world. Now, earlier, his press secretary said there were conditions.
What we know is that the maximum pressure campaign has clearly been effective. We know that it has put a tremendous amount of pressure on North Korea, and they have made some major promises. They've made promises to denuclearize. They've made promises to stop nuclear and missile testing, and they've recognized that regular military exercises between the U.S. and its ally, South Korea, will continue. Pressure campaign, we're not letting up. We're not going to step back or make any changes to that. We're going to continue in that effort, and we're not going to have this meeting take place until we see concrete actions, that words and the rhetoric of North Korea.
Well, the announcement of possible talks follows something of a thaw in relations between North and South Korea, which saw them march under a single flag at the recent Winter Olympics. The South Korean president, Moon Jae-in, says that the plane is like a miracle. But how has the news gone down in the capital, Seoul? Laura Bicker has been finding out.
For months, Seoul wondered if it faced the prospect of war once again. Today, it woke to better news. The prospect of a stunning Trump-Kim summit has turned an impending crisis into an opportunity. The Korean War is not forgotten here. The fighting ended with no peace treaty. Now future generations hope these talks will prevent further confrontation.
I think this will be a turning point, and through this our future children will benefit from living in a more free and peaceful world.
I think it is a good thing for both countries. And as a South Korean citizen, it's good that the threat of war has reduced even by a little.
Even if things turn out well, it won't benefit the people in North Korea. In the past, when the South Korean president provided aid to North Korea, I heard almost none of it went to the common people. So I don't think it's going to turn out well.
Decades of distrust and suspicion divide North and South. People have learned that hope can be a bad thing. I'm told it's hard to tell what is real progress and what is propaganda.
A strong word of caution. The road ahead is very long, very complicated, very complex, and there's no guarantee that the North will ever give up its nuclear weapons easily, if at all.
These talks are a huge political gamble. Presidents Moon and Trump could be being played by Pyongyang, or this peninsula could be on the verge of something it's been searching for nearly 7 decades, a peace treaty.
This statue portrays two brothers divided by the war in a last desperate embrace. There's a sense of cautious optimism that this unresolved conflict could now have a higher ending. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Seoul.
An aid convoy has successfully unloaded its food supplies in the rebel-held enclave of Eastern Ghouta in Syria. It was the third attempt this week to get lorries into the area to help trapped civilians. The Red Cross says it hopes to get medical supplies into the area next week. So far, they haven't been allowed. Andrew Plant reports.
Food supplies driven into Eastern Ghouta, on board enough to feed 12,000 people in an area where 400,000 have been under siege since 2013. Humanitarian groups say it's not nearly enough. Many, like Abu Qasim, are fleeing their homes, taking only what they can.
Our situation is catastrophic. We have no clothes, no underwear, no food. We just have these sheep. We left everything behind.
The aid is meant to reach civilians in eastern Ghouta, a rebel enclave outside the capital Damascus. Estimates are that around 940 people have died here since intense bombing began last month, 200 of them children.
We heard that an aid convoy will arrive. This is not a solution. The solution is to stop the airstrikes. They are bringing in food to eat, but if people are dying, what use is it?
Some militants have been given permission to leave. Syrian state TV here showing what it said were rebels and their families being driven away. Hospitals and health centres have been destroyed in the bombing. Doctors say a mass resupply of medicine is urgent, but the convoys can take in only food to prevent rebel fighters from accessing treatment. Meanwhile, it's thought there are around 700 civilians who are seriously injured. A daily fighting was agreed in principle last week, but isn't sticking.
Every day we liberate. Every day enemy fight collapsing. They don't have what it takes to face the men of the Syrian Arab Army.
There are reports that shelling resumed even as these aid trucks delivered their food on Friday, the third time they've tried this week. The hope is more can get through in the coming days, but a break in the to happen. Andrew Plant, BBC News.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news. Martin Shkreli, the former drug company executive who became infamous in 2015 for increasing the price of a life-saving AIDS medication by 5,000%, has been found guilty of fraud and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Shkreli, known as Pharma Bro, first made headlines when he jacked up the price of Daraprim from $13 per dose to $750. But shortly after, he was indicted for defrauding investors in 2 hedge funds he ran. The EU says it may challenge Donald Trump's decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminium. It claims they are in breach of World Trade Organization rules. The British government says as a close ally of the United States, it would seek exemption from the tariffs. A visit to the UK by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has ended with the promise of a massive arms deal. The Saudis have agreed in principle to buy 48 fighter jets in a controversial deal worth several $billion. The Saudi Air Force is spearheading an air campaign to dislodge Yemeni Houthi rebels. The UN has blamed those airstrikes for the majority of civilian casualties. Now, the body language looked promising. Both men were calling each other brother. It was unexpected, a public appearance which they made, an apparent reconciliation of Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and the opposition leader Raila Odinga. It was their first meeting since last year's acrimonious elections. But behind the smiles, do the deep divisions still remain? From Nairobi, Ferdinand Amondi sent this report.
No one saw this coming today in Kenya. The country's leading political figures finally came together to talk after months of pressure to do just that. The opposition leader admitted the country is on the brink.
The time has come for us to confront and resolve our differences. These differences are becoming too entrenched. No two Kenyans agree on the origins of the differences and what they portend. As we fight ostensibly to save ourselves from each other, the reality is we need to save our children from ourselves.
The president, after repeatedly dismissing calls for dialogue, explained why he finally relented.
Elections come and go, but Kenya remains. So as we plan ourselves for the future, our future cannot be dictated by the forthcoming election. Our future must be dictated by the prosperity, stability of our nation and the well-being of our people.
They presented an image of 2 men who'd agreed to resolve their difference, but it won't. Kenya is sharply divided along ethnic lines following the bitterly contested general elections last year that had to be held twice. The opposition feels the elections were not credible and protests, more than 100 Kenyans were killed. Human rights groups accused police of brutality and the state of high-handedness. None of this was mentioned today, only a joint call for national dialogue. The unexpected public appearance comes as U.S. Foreign Secretary visits Kenya as part of his visit to Africa. In Ethiopia, he criticized the state of emergency, and some see today's meeting as a preemptive public relations stunt to water down any potential telling off, while others have welcomed the union today as long overdue. Two of the most polarizing political individuals in this country today came together and repeatedly called brother. It is expected that the beginning of national dialogue might finally lead Kenya to the much-needed healing. Ferdinand Mondi, BBC News, Nairobi.
Stay with us here on BBC News, because still a symbol of oppression or a sign of empowerment. Why increasing numbers of young British women are choosing to wear a headscarf. This is BBC News, and these are the latest headlines. America's National Rifle Association is taking legal action against a gun safety bill in the state of Florida, which was signed into law earlier. Donald Trump has tweeted that a deal with North Korea is very much in the making. Earlier, a White House official had cast doubt over a possible meeting between him and Kim Jong-un. Well, let's get more now on that story. Tim Shorrock is a correspondent for The Nation and the Korea Center for Investigative Journalism in Seoul. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. Tim, I have to confess that I am skeptical that President Trump will meet Kim Jong-un. Am I right to be skeptical?
I think you're right to be skeptical. I think he says he's going to, and they're making clear that this meeting will go through. So we'll see what happens.
But there are huge divisions between both sides. I mean, could you just explain the two positions, the position of North Korea on the one hand and the position of the United States on the other?
Well, on the one hand, North Korea wants the U.S. to end what it calls its hostile policy toward them. It wants to de-escalate the situation and wants to, move forward without sanctions and, as a normal country. It wants to normalize relations with the United States. It has for a long time. And it's told the South Korean delegation that went to Pyongyang recently that it had agreed, long-term to denuclearization, apparently. And they've also agreed, I think this was a huge concession on the North Korean side, that they will allow or, not object to U.S.-South Korean military exercises going on on a scaled-down basis. That's what North Korea wants. And, of course, they want this meeting with a U.S. president. The United States, wants denuclearization and wants them to end this period and wants talks leading to that. And so, that's what, so the twain meet. Well, we shall see. But I think, the set up to get something going. And, I think it's an important breakthrough myself.
In between the United States and North Korea, you have South Korea. I mean, where do they stand in all of this?
Well, this has been driven completely by South Korean President Moon Jae-in. He's the one who began the outreach to North Korea when he became president 10 months ago, and he offered to talk when he became president. He extended the olive branch to them. They basically ignored him all last year while they were developing their nuclear and missile program, especially the missile program. And January 1, Kim Jong-un gave this address and reached out to Moon Jae-in and said he would like to send a delegation to the Olympics, participate in the Olympics, and that's what began this, this deep dialogue that's happened. So South Korea has a huge amount. For one thing, they don't want to have a war on the Korean Peninsula. Moon Jae-in, the president, has made that very clear. He did not want any kind of unilateral U.S. attack on on North Korea, because he knew very well that war would spill into South Korea and lead to a full-scale warfare. So, I mean, they have a lot at stake, a huge amount at stake.
Okay. That's Tim Shorrock, the National newspaper. Thank you so much for joining us. An increasing number of young British Muslim women are choosing to wear a hijab or headscarf. It's not without controversy, though. Women in some Muslim countries, such as Iran, are campaigning against it as a symbol of oppression. But here in Britain, some women are taking the opposite view, seeing it as empowering. Nomia Iqbal reports.
The spotlight is on the hijab. Many Muslim women choose to wear it proudly. For some, it's an act of modesty. For others, in countries forced to wear it, it's a symbol to remove in protest. It may divide opinion, but the hijab is going high fashion. 20-year-old model Shahira Yusuf has been signed up by Storm, the agency that found supermodel Kate Moss. Shahira is one of the first British models with a hijab taking to the catwalk.
Smile. Yeah, I definitely don't want to be considered a token girl. I don't want these models, like ethnic models or models from different religious backgrounds, to just pave the way. I want the way to stay there, you know, to become a norm within society, because it is a norm outside of the modelling sphere.
Shahira is becoming the face of fashion. At this show in London, Muslim designers have come from all over the world to promote their clothes. The market for modest fashion is on course to be worth billions. I grew up in a Muslim family, and none of the women in my family wore the hijab. None of my Muslim friends wore it either. But now, more and more young women are wearing it.
The reason why I wear it is to, number one, cover my hair, and number two, to be honest, I actually really enjoy wearing the hijab. I enjoy covering my hair. Like the head wraps I have today, I feel like it makes a statement. It's part of who I am. It's my crown.
Hijab to me is empowerment, and it's feminism, and it's taking control and ownership of what I choose to show to the world.
Being online has given some women a powerful platform. Social media star Mariah Idrissi has a huge following on Instagram.
The hijab is a part of me, it's part of my career, and it's representation, you know. We shouldn't be ashamed or shy to represent who we are.
If you're a model wearing a hijab and you're on Instagram and you're having thousands of people following you, doing the opposite of what the hijab's supposed to be about.
The mainstream media, the Western media, isn't representing Muslims on TV, in fashion, anywhere, and the only time we are represented is for something bad. So I just saw this as, you know what, I'm on the news and I'm talking about something that's not about terrorism, that's not about women being oppressed, I'm talking about fashion.
Some campaigners for Muslim women's rights think the hijab's popularity is a political statement. They feel uneasy about its use as an expression of identity.
Modest does not mean you need to put a hijab. Modesty goes beyond that in your behavior, in your way of dressing, and I don't need to prove to anybody what I am. Putting the hijab, you are singling yourself and proving something unnecessary, especially in the Western world.
The hijab means different things to different people. Shahira believes you can wear it and be a successful model. Her dream, the cover of British Vogue, wearing her hijab. Nomia Iqbal, BBC News.
Now let's just show you these pictures of a massive fireworks display in Mexico. The town of Tultepec was celebrating the local saint. Thousands of locals and visitors took to the streets for celebration and danced among the fireworks, even though dozens of people were killed here just last December at an explosion at a fireworks market. Now, another story which I wanted to show you guys. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this from earlier in the week. Flippy the robot, this is from California. Flippy the robot, the burger flipping robot, 7 customers at a restaurant in Pasadena. The idea, of course, was to replace human cooks, but after just one day on the job, guess what? He's been forced to take a break. Why? Because he was just too slow. Flippy's human helpers are getting some more training as well, so the robot can actually keep up with our burger demands. Just a reminder, you can get in touch with me and most of the team on Twitter. I am at Nkemi Fejika. Goodbye.